Hello, this is Arlene White Swan. This is part 2 of the other video I did where I had to cut off short about Camelot and the sword suit. So kind of picking up where I left off, I had talked about Arthur and I had talked about some of the high drama that goes on at Camelot, which is why I was basically directed by the tuathadedanaantarot to put Camelot in the sword suit. And the first card that we see is the Page of, or the Maiden of Swords. And the Maiden of Swords is an interesting card here because the image that they sent to me was of Salome, who had John the Baptist beheaded. So it's actually quite a deep symbol because you have the aspect of the Page or Maiden of Swords as loving, dancing, and balancing, which of course Salome was a dancer. But there's also the fact that because the Arthurian legends were written by clerics, ecclesiastics, monks, because they were one of the few classes of people who could read and write in the medieval times, Arthur was framed as a Christian king, even though his father is of the dragon bloodline and his mother is of the Atlantean magician bloodline. He's presented by the monks as a Christian king. And this gets even more strong in France when Chrétien de Troyes writes The Quest of the Holy Grail, and then the Christian element is really strengthened along with the Crusades because, of course, Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II were the parents of Richard the Lionheart, and it was in the courts of love of Marie de France and Eleanor of Aquitaine that the Arthurian romances were developed in France, including the Quest for the Holy Grail. So this Salome image brings together the Old Testament with the New Testament, as John the Baptist is kind of a hinge figure. And you could kind of see Arthur as a hinge figure as well, because he is literally surrounded with all the pagan and old race, old religion elements, and they've got it in for him. And as the sword suit develops, you'll see that that's how it all plays out. So in essence, when Salome beheads John the Baptist, as in this image, it sort of prefigures Morgan Le Fay symbolically beheading Arthur as she schemes to put Mordred on the throne. So Arthur, of course, he pulled the sword from the stone at 12 years old and became the King of England. And he was crowned in Stonehenge, where allegedly his father, Uther Pendragon, is buried. And he has a symbol of the bear because Arthur means bear, and he is connected to the constellation of the bear in the heavens. So there's a very strong warrior element to the bear. He's young and he's a bit untested. He's untried. He's got his sword, but he's not quite wielding it yet. Of course, as we know, the swords represent the sun rising and the spring and the air and everything fresh and new and young. And so it's just that Arthur is at the beginning of his reign very green, you could say. But still strong. And on the front of his sash, there is a kind of a sea serpent, which is something that harkens him back to his parents, his father being of the dragon bloodline, as I said, and his mother, a priestess of the Atlantean magicians, and also his half-sister Morgan Le Fay, and Morgan is a kind of a mermaid. And so this is the sign that he is still beholden in a way, also because he got Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. He's still beholden to that underworld fairy kingdom, even though he's not really of them. As we know, Arthur is paired up with Guinevere, who is not, as I said, I don't believe she's really human. She is an otherworldly, very ethereal creature. She's the White Phantom, the White Lady, the White Fairy. However you want to perceive that, I believe she's a fairy. And she suffers a lot because she is the sovereignty of the land. She represents the sovereignty of the land. And she's caught between worlds. So she's married to King Arthur, who is, for all intents and purposes, human, and she's not human, so naturally she gravitates towards Lancelot, whose mother is the Lady of the Lake. He's called Lancelot du Lac, Lancelot of the Lake. So he and she are more alike in that respect. She has a lot of iconography in this image of sacrifice. For instance, the dove, which is again a Christian symbol in the sense that it's the Holy Spirit, but it's also the dove of the sacrifice. Her sword is pointed down because she's the feminine, and she is not wielding the sword as a warrior, but as her stake is in the land. And the black and white swans show the romantic nature of her story, where she's torn between the king and her true love, Lancelot. Nothing really ever works out for Guinevere. Her marriage to Arthur is childless, and there's probably a biological reason for that. And her, even her relationship with Lancelot is also childless. So she is a kind of a between the worlds creature. She is really not of this world. And Lancelot, of course, he is half human. His mother is the Lady of the Lake, so he's definitely half fairy. And he has his own powers. And one, he's the perfect knight. So we get into the Christian side of all of this with the chivalric tradition, which is based on a Christian concept of love, selflessness, worship of the woman that was symbolized by the Virgin Mary, a sort of unattainable, perfect woman. In a sense, Guinevere represents that because she's not quite, she's not human. She's like a Virgin Mary. She's an ideal. But anyway, so Lancelot arrives as the best knight. He's Arthur's bosom buddy. And we all know what happens with him and Guinevere. Now, when the Holy Grail stories are written, Lancelot is meant to achieve the quest of the Holy Grail, but he doesn't make it because of his illicit relationship with Guinevere. He was meant to be paired with the Lady Elaine, called the Lily Maid Elaine, who is another seemingly not 100% human being either. She's connected to the Grail family and all of that, and a spell is done. Again, the same as what happened with Arthur's birth with Arthur Pendragon and Igraine, the same as what happened with Arthur and Morgause under the spell of Morgan Le Fay. And again, Merlin does a spell to convince Lancelot that Elaine is Guinevere, and he sleeps with her, and Elaine gives birth to Sir Galahad, who does achieve the Grail. So this Grail family is all still in the same bloodline. And another thing to keep in mind that's in keeping with this sword suit is that it is Lancelot and Guinevere's relationship that brings down the Round Table. I will go into that story when I talk about the wands or the spear suit. Because, yeah, Lancelot destroys the whole thing because of Guinevere. Now, with the Ace of Swords, Arthur receives the sword Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. This, I believe, is a pact that he must make. He's being born from the dragon bloodline, which is from the line of Cain in the Bible, with the Pendragon, and an Atlantean high priestess. And he is going to be a Christian king, which I'm not sure whose influence that is, aside from the monks, because Merlin was certainly a druid, and that was his advisor. So the Christianity has come in through the writers of these stories. But his allegiance, because he has this sword, will be to the fairy realm, whether he knows it or not. Now, all the twos in this deck are Tristan and Isolde. And I do have another video where I tell the story of Tristan and Isolde using the tarot deck here. The reason they fit with the House of Camelot is because their love story mirrors that of Lancelot and Guinevere, because again, Tristan's best friend is King Mark, and he brings Isolde to King Mark, and then he and Isolde, because of a love potion in this case, which is another kind of spell, have this mad, crazy, obsessive love affair. And in the Two of Swords, we see a kind of truce, because the Two of Swords often means a truce or a friendship. At one point, Tristan and Isolde run away to the forest, and they fall asleep. And to prove that they are chaste, in other words, the courtly love element is there, but also the loyalty of Tristan to his king is also still present. Tristan lays his sword between he and Isolde as they sleep. King Mark has pursued them into the forest, and he finds them. And when he sees Tristan's sword lying between Tristan and Isolde, he exchanges Tristan's sword for his. So when Tristan wakes up, he sees King Mark's sword and knows that they've been caught, but King Mark has had mercy on them. The thing to note about Tristan and Isolde and King Mark is that they're not supernatural beings, they're humans. So the story has a tragic ending, but it doesn't actually destroy the world. If Camelot is the world, Lancelot and Guinevere's obsession with each other, their passion, had the power to destroy the world as they knew it. The Three of Swords, we see Morgause, Morgan Le Fay, and Mordred as a child. Sometimes the Three of Swords, which is called communications cut off. It's also can be about conspiracies behind the scenes and great sorrows. The bloody lion in the tapestry behind them represents Arthur, who they are plotting to bring down. In the Four of Swords, Merlin retreats to his cave. When Arthur finally reached adulthood and was old enough to not need Merlin's advice anymore, Merlin retired to his crystal cave in the mountains, in Wales, I'm sure, where he just took a chill out time. But the problem is that while he was chilling out, all hell was kind of breaking loose, and this was when things in Camelot began to go very pear-shaped. Another aspect of the Arthurian legend has to do with the wasteland, which is what comes about in the Holy Grail saga. And one of the reasons that the wasteland was created, and the elucidation by Chrétien de Troyes, which is when he described the priestesses of the wells. And these are more involved in the Grail suit or the cup suit. But here they're in the sword suit because these were priestesses of the wells, and they wear the generative moon crowns on their heads. And they serve the weary pilgrim, usually on his way to the Holy Land or something. They serve him by giving him water from the sacred wells in a golden cup, which is like a grail. King Amangons took an invading army into what we would think of as France or the British Isles, anyway, Christendom. King Amangons came in and slaughtered all the priestesses and stole their golden grail, and caused a wasteland because no one was tending to the waters of life anymore. And I do see this as kind of being a product of the Crusades, where the Saracens and the Christians were clashing. And I believe it was during Henry II's reign, with Richard the Lionheart as his son, that France finally lost the Holy Land. There were French kings. I don't know how many people know this. There were French kings in the Holy Land for centuries before the Saracens removed them. And Henry II was the last king of Jerusalem. I think I'm going to have to leave you on a cliffhanger and make a part 3 of this, because I don't think too many people can listen to me talking for this long. To be honest, if I was a better filmmaker, I'd have all kinds of scenes, you know, but I'm not really a good at that. So, yeah, I'm going to have to make a part 3, but hopefully this is interesting. And if you lasted this long, you can like, share, and subscribe, since this is my YouTube channel. So I'm going to do 6 of Swords to 10 of Swords next time. So watch out for part 3. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.